Hey guys, it's your tired teacher back again. And this time we are covering World War One, the war to end all wars, or at least so we thought. But anyways, World War One, man, I have like such a high appreciation for World War One, especially now that I know more about it. It's actually a really interesting war to cover. And I mean, movies like 1917, dude, that did trench warfare some justice. So, highly recommend you guys watch that to see the brutality of World War One. But anyways, let's go ahead and get involved in World War One in a U.S. centric way because hey, this is U.S. history. Well, this is APUSH, and yeah, we kind of enter the war late. But anyways, you guys should have already started covering this through world history, and yeah, you should be familiar at least a little bit with it. So let's go ahead and jump right in and go into our main causes. You see how it all spells out the acronym MAIN? Because we've got militarism, which is basically the arms race. We have alliances. We have imperialism, which is our rivalry over colonies. And then we have nationalism. So those four big things caused World War One. Those are our long-term causes, all right? They've been boiling underneath the surface for a while. So let's go ahead and split these up one by one and start off with nationalism. So you guys remember this. I mean, it's the belief that your own country is like pretty freaking awesome. It's superior to everything on the planet, basically. And you want your country to be freaking cool, strong. I mean, and how you do that is you do that through acquiring territory, which brings in imperialism, right? The scramble for Africa, carving up of Asia. I mean, the United States gaining little bitty island nations in the Caribbean and the South Pacific, along with the Philippines. So, I mean, you could see how, like, gaining land leads to showing off the strength of a country. And how you gain that land is through militarism, building up your navies, your armies, basically the arms race right here. So once you have a strong military, you're able to conquer these areas with imperialism, right? And the reason why you're doing imperialism is because of nationalism, because you have that extreme pride in your country to be like the best country on the planet. So, Great Britain traditionally had like the best navy ever amongst the countries in, Europe and, well, yeah. So, Germany is going to start to expand their navy, which is going to really create tension between the two countries. And we'll see that pour out here with World War One. So, also, let's see, France and Germany got some beef going on too, thanks to France losing the Alsace-Lorraine in the Franco-Prussian War. So, yeah, the two countries not gonna really agree with each other, and France is beefing up their army. So you see how, like, these foreign nations are building up their military. So, the last piece of the puzzle here is alliances. Now, these alliances were secret alliances. So, and they were as such to where an attack on one was an attack on all. So here's how tangled up we get into this. Austria-Hungary had an agreement with Germany, who had an agreement with Italy, and, well, the Ottoman Empire was aligned with Germany against Russia. So basically that's one squad right there, all right? Squad number 2 over here is Serbia, who has an agreement with Russia, who had an agreement with France, who had an agreement with Great Britain, who had an agreement with Belgium to protect its neutrality. So, what should be just a fight amongst Austria-Hungary and Serbia, thanks to our initial spark right here. This is our immediate cause of World War I, the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. This should have just been a fight between Austria-Hungary and Serbia, but because of those secret alliances, remember, an attack on one is an attack on all. So that brings in all of those freaking countries into war. Now, the Black Hand was the organization responsible for assassinating the Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his family, I want to believe. Somebody correct me in the comments there. But anyways, this big mess is going to start a world war. So, really, these foreign alliances were trouble, man. Because, I mean, let's look at the timeline here. All right. So, the Archduke is assassinated on June 28th, 1914. That same day, Austria-Hungary is going to declare war on Serbia, right? Okay, that's understandable. But then here come the alliances. Germany declares war on Russia because it is aligned with Austria-Hungary, and Serbia is aligned with Russia. Germany also declares war on France because, Russia and France and Serbia are on the same squad. And, of course, Germany is on Austria-Hungary's squad. And then Germany, on August 4th, is going to invade Belgium, which is going to get Great Britain into the fight here. And they declare war on the same day. And then President Wilson's like, whoa, U.S. is kind of staying out of this bar fight. Yeah, that's a meme, guys. If World War I was a bar fight, it's actually pretty freaking accurate when it comes to describing this foreign alliance mess. But anyways, United States, Wilson's like, nah, bro, we good. We're going to stay over here in the corner and isolate ourselves. And then, a couple days later, Austria-Hungary is going to declare war on Russia because they're bros. Germany did that. Japan is aligned with Great Britain. They're going to declare war on Germany. The Ottoman Empire joins up in the war in October and sides with the Central Powers. Which, speaking of the Central Powers, here we go. Here are our main boys here for the Central Powers. We got Austria-Hungary, we got Germany, Bulgaria, Turkey. Yeah. Well, the Ottoman Empire. And then, for our allies, we got France, the UK, with all of its colonies. We got Italy, Japan, Serbia, Russia, Romania, Greece, Portugal, and eventually the United States. But we do have some neutral nations up in the mix here too. We got Spain, Norway, Belgium, Switzerland, Sweden, and Denmark. So what should have been just a war between Austria-Hungary and Serbia ended up being a freaking global war. Secret alliances, man. I swear, World War I is a big, gang fight / bar fight. So, two squads going up against each other. But, World War I is really freaking brutal, man. This is going to be our first modern, quote-unquote, modern war. So, what we're talking about here is technology. So here we got the machine gun. And these guys are wearing gas masks. That's why they look like freaking crazy here. But the machine gun is brand new technology for this war. And really, dude, this is going to mow down so many cavalry horses and people on horseback and, whatnot. Cavalry soldiers. Yeah, we don't use the cavalry again because of the brutality of this machine gun. Railroads are still going to be important, though. So this is still some old technology we still use. And we use it for transportation, right? Transporting troops, transporting supplies. And ships. Ships are old technology too, but this time we got steel-clad ships that we've been using throughout imperialism, but this is the first war per se, global war that they see. Though we did use them in the Spanish-American War. All right. Still, transport troops, transport supplies, same deal. New technology for transportation, though, is going to be the airplane. Airplane is brand freaking new. The Wright brothers had just had their successful flight in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, a few years prior to that. So yeah, airplanes, buddy. It's gonna be new freaking business. And early airplanes, like in World War I, were kind of crazy. You see the machine guns mounted on top of there, on top of like the wings right there. So early airplanes quite didn't have the clocking mechanism down to where, you shoot in between the propellers. So a lot of the times the dudes like shot themselves down at first. Just terrible. And even before they had the machine guns mounted, people would be like doing like drive-by shootings with pistols. They'd be throwing all kinds of crazy stuff at each other, like chains to try to get caught in the propellers. Dude, there's even like instances where they dropped anvils. Anvils! Like what? And other crazy crap like chucking spears at each other and, well, of course, dropping the bomb, literally, down below. Can you just imagine that? You're like lighting up the fuse of a bomb and you're like just tossing it out the side there. Dude, much respect to these early pilots, man. They had to deal with so much crap. But anyways, yeah, airplanes, brand new to the scene. You do some reconnaissance with them, plus you could actually do some combat, so pretty freaking cool. All right. Zeppelins are kind of new as well. These are gas-filled, I think helium gas-filled blimps. And of course they do reconnaissance missions. They can also drop some bombs as well. They are going to be pretty devastating, but if you hit one, it's going to explode. So, yeah. All right, some more new technology. It's going to be submarines, or rather U-boats. They call them U-boats because they're like underwater boats. See? There. Makes sense. Anyways, U-boats are going to be used by the Germans relentlessly to attack Allied ships. And so, yeah, they're going to be notorious and treacherous out in the Atlantic. So, keep an eye on those German U-boats. Other stuff we got, improved technology as far as like cannons go, long-range artillery here. We're going to go ahead and shoot those off from our big ships, most likely. Though we do have some cannons down below, as you can see on the bottom left-hand corner, but probably the most devastating piece of technology that we got as far as like actual weaponry, machine guns, for sure. I mean, so much destruction with the machine gun. So much. And in the later part of the war, the tanks are going to be introduced. Early tanks are like a big hot mess. Yeah, they're big and scary. They do not sound pleasant whatsoever. I mean, they're freaking crazy, but they get stuck often. Gears break down. I mean, they're not as useful in World War I as they will be in World War II when they're rather perfected by that time. But nonetheless, tanks are big and scary, and we still use them in World War I. Another thing that is scary in World War I is the usage of poisonous gas, like mustard gas. So, I think mustard gas is what? Chlorine and ammonia? Don't go like mixing this stuff, guys. Just no. But anyways, that gas, you could see there, like in that picture, this guy is like choking. He doesn't have his gas mask on. Yeah, that gas basically attaches itself to moisture. So it's going to sting the hell out of your eyes and burn them. Burn your esophagus, burn your lungs. Anywhere that sweats and has moisture, it's going to burn it. It's going to give it a good chemical burn. So, yeah, you wish you were dead when you get exposed to poisonous gas. Sometimes when they would drop the gas, release the gas, the winds would shift and it would hit like your own line. So yeah, a gas mask was definitely a must on the battlefield in World War I. You can even see the horse. The horse has a gas mask. So yeah, I mean, poisonous gas is going to be freaking brutal. as well as trench warfare. Trench warfare is incredibly brutal because, I mean, think about the conditions that you guys have. Like, seriously, the trenches are basically dirt tunnels, dirt, like, passageways. So, of course, when it rains, it's going to be all muddy. I mean, you're there in the mud, and you're going to have to deal with nastiness like trench foot, trench mouth. Just crazy stuff going on. And, I mean, rats are going to be all over the place, insects. It is not a pleasant place to be. And people sometimes go crazy. They go crazy with, like, shell shock. Because, yeah, you're getting constant bombardment, and, I mean, really, it's gonna affect you. So, trenches were very nasty, and were used tremendously on the Western Front in World War I. So, when it was time to go over the top, you would do just that. You would go over the top of the trench, and more than likely get mowed down by machine guns, or caught in the barbed wire outside no man's land. Because no man's land is that point in between the trenches. And this area is going to be incredibly dangerous, especially if you get stuck in there. You're best off like hiding in an artillery shell crater, and trying to like move about at night, because during the day, yeah, the machine gun's going to get you. And it's brutal. Like I said, guys, the movie 1917 actually does a really good freaking job showing you guys the trenches, no man's land, and just the nastiness of World War I. So, that should give you guys a great visual if you've seen that movie. But I mean, yeah, we're still using some old technology as well, like hot air balloons and such, to try to find enemy positions, rescue fallen soldiers, and the like. But I mean, yeah, this new technology that we have for World War I is definitely going to change the game, for sure. So that when World War II enters on the scene, we're already using the new stuff and we're enhancing it. So, the wounded in World War I. Alright, this is where your triage station would be. And surgery and just like your ICU and everything. In a place like that, you know, a church with its walls pretty much bombed out. So, yeah, these are your medical conditions right here. And I mean, we do have organizations like the Red Cross, the YMCA, and the Salvation Army, which will as well, you know, volunteer their times and efforts to help out with the war. So we're going to use various animals in the war, like obviously horses. So if you guys have seen the movie War Horse, you get a good depiction on how animals are used during the war. Bloodhounds are going to be used to seek out the wounded. You see the little medical bags strapped on their back because they could get through no man's land. And that picture down there is a dog with a gas mask on. But yeah, we're going to also use carrier pigeons. I mean, we're going to use a whole bunch of stuff during this war. So, one of the big battles that we see early on is the Battle of Verdun. And yeah, there's not much left of Verdun. Like, really, it was tore up. But let's fast forward to U.S. involvement, though, because, I mean, we need something to get the U.S. involved. Because so far, what's been going on is that we've been playing it neutral, while the whole world, I mean, see Chinese and Moroccan soldiers there in France, Japanese and Russian armies in Siberia, like, the whole world has been getting involved. But here in the United States, we're still trying to figure out what to do. There's debate over joining the war. And here's how people kind of feel about it. Most Americans want to remain neutral because they felt It wasn't our fight. It was something that should have been handled between Austria, Hungary, and Serbia, right? And plus, Europe is way too far away. We have to cross the Atlantic Ocean just to, like, get people over there. And it's going to be hella expensive. Let's face it, the progressive era is still happening at this time. So our priority is still to try to get as much money as possible to fund these progressive era reforms. So we also have divided loyalties amongst our immigrants and amongst the business community as well, because, I mean, let's face it, we trade with both Germany and Great Britain and France. So we don't want to sever those ties. We don't want to basically fight against our trading partners. So when talking about immigrant populations, German Americans definitely do not want to fight against Germany, right? I mean, ties to the fatherland, basically. And then Irish Americans are like, screw Great Britain. We don't like them. Especially because there has been a suppression of the independence movement in Ireland at that time. So really, I mean, the immigrant populations are not on board with joining the Allies, at least for a good part. But yeah, there's going to be a reason why we do eventually join the Allies, though. And that's because of Great Britain, mostly. We had more money invested with Great Britain than we did with Germany. So there's our money motivation right there. And some of it is racial, because our Anglo-Saxon heritage. We share that heritage. So, the elite people living out east never really severed those ties with Great Britain. I mean, we got that going on as well. And Germany's kind of like really looking kind of sketchy at this time. We're uncertain about what's going on with Germany. France hooks us up with the American Revolution, so we still got some ties with them too. And they're on the side of the Allies. And you know, Great Britain serves the same ideals as us. Wilson really looks up to them because they do have an interest in democracy. And since he does want to make that world safe for democracy, you know, Great Britain's a good match for us. And Wilson, of course, with his moral diplomacy, I mean, joining up with the Allies like aligns with his agenda. Plus, the British propaganda is going to make Germany look like a bunch of brutes. And then we've got stuff like the Lusitania sinking, which carried more than 1,000 people were killed, including 128 Americans. So this ship, the Lusitania, was sunk by a German U-boat in 1915. So yeah, Germany's not looking good like for us at all. And even though this event really angers people, we still don't join the war for about 2 more years. Because we kind of believe Germany when it says, oh yeah, we're not going to attack any more like merchant ships. They enter the Sussex Pledge. With us. And we demand that they don't sink any merchant ships without warning, or else we're going to sever diplomatic ties with them. So they agree, and it lasts until January of 1917. And this is because the German government, its people were starting to starve because the British had blockaded any ports that they may have been trying to access. So they're going to announce now an unrestricted submarine warfare, where they're just going to attack anything they see. This gets the United States angry. So that's why President Wilson's going to start pushing for war. But in 1916, we're kind of really not prepared. I mean, we aren't. So we need to do a couple of things to start preparing. Now, Wilson's going to start calling on Congress to expand the armed forces. And Democrats are going to be kind of split on this. They're going to be opposed to any military increases. But when Congress actually does the National Defense Act, it's going to end up increasing the number of our Army and National Guardsmen. We're going to funnel more money into the Navy, and the Council of National Defense is going to be created to coordinate industry and defense, which will prove important later. And we're going to beef up our merchant marine fleet at this time. But yeah, there is opposition to war. A lot of Americans in the Midwest and the West are really opposed to all of this. They fear U.S. involvement. Anti-war activists, of course, are going to be progressives and populists and socialists because they all want to focus on reform here in the United States. And socialists think this is like a capitalist war, so they hate it anyways. Populists and progressives, however, want the U.S. to focus on, completing its reform efforts. So you've got big-time progressives like William Jennings Bryan, Jane Addams, Jeanette Rankin, who is the first woman elected to Congress. They are totally against this war, and they will speak out against it. Women suffragettes are also going to campaign against military buildup, but during the war, they're going to really support the war effort. So this is going to change Wilson's mind on suffrage. And speaking of Wilson, he's got a re-election in 1916, and he runs on the slogan, "He kept us out of the war." So his Republican challenger, Charles Evan Hughes, is going to call Wilson out on that and be like, yeah, you're not willing to stand up against the Germans, blah, blah, blah. So pretty much, because this country is still very isolationist, they side with Wilson. Even though it is pretty close when you look at the popular vote and even the electoral vote. Look at that, 48% to 52%. Yeah, it's a close election. But Wilson wins, and barely, because look at the California vote total, 3,800 votes in California, so that's what pushes him over the top there. Yeah, it was a close call, but it pays off because U.S. is going to get involved in World War I. And here are the immediate causes for the U.S. involvement in World War I. First off, we do have that unrestricted submarine warfare. All right, when Germany broke the Sussex Pledge, Wilson is going to get really pissed at them because here they are attacking everything. Even American ships. So, yeah, we get pissed. We don't want our ships attacked. Wilson was giving Germany the benefit of the doubt that they wouldn't attack our ships because we did have the Sussex Pledge. But when 4 unarmed merchant ships were sunk in March of 1917, it's kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back when it comes to the unrestricted submarine warfare. But here's the thing that really angers us. The Zimmerman Notes. Okay, this was intercepted, I think, by the British. And essentially, what the Zimmerman Note says in code right there, that you could see it, is pretty much, hey, Mexico, you want to join our side and attack the United States? We will give you all the territory you lost to them, including New Mexico, Texas, and Arizona. Mexico is going to pretend they didn't see that. They're going to be like, nope. Pretend we didn't see this, because remember, at the same time, Blackjack Pershing was trying to capture Pancho Villa, and Wilson was already pissed off at Carranza because he couldn't keep his boy in check. So we had already marched troops in Mexico. Yeah, Mexico's like not about this at all. And of course, when we find out about it, now we're really pissed at Germany trying to make a pass at Mexico and try to attack us. So, another thing that's going to get us into the war is Russia's pulling out of the war. because we really didn't agree with the whole Bolsheviks and, the Bolshevik Revolution. This is a time of like Lenin and, communists taking over Russia. So communism doesn't really apply to Wilson's moral diplomacy. So yeah, he's not about joining the side with Russia. So when Russia's out, the U.S. is in. And March 15th is when the Russian revolutionaries overthrow the Tsar, and they're going to withdraw. So now that has happened, in April 2nd, 1917, Wilson's going to formally ask Congress to declare war. And this is the very famous quote from Wilson: "The world must be made safe for democracy." So that's aligning with his moral diplomacy, and really that's going to kind of prop us into war. Congress does declare war. There are a few notable exceptions, like Robert Lafayette, Janet Rankin, who are going to vote against it. But, the U.S. is officially in. But we don't join right away, though. We're officially in, but we're still unprepared. We need some troops. So in May 1st, 1917, this is the Army Expansion Act. And so look at how much we build up, from 200,000 to 4.7 million in armed forces. So how we're going to successfully do this is with the Selective Service Act, the draft. Now remember, we already had a draft in the Civil War, and that kind of ended in disaster with the New York draft riots, right? We had to recall soldiers from Gettysburg just to stop those riots. But this time around, selective service is not going to have the same loopholes as the draft, the Conscription Act in the Civil War, because we get rid of the exemption as far as paying somebody to substitute for you. We get rid of that. So all males between the ages of 21 and 30, later it's going to be changed from 18 to 45, they're required to register for the draft. And this draft is still in existence today, guys. You still have to register for the draft if you're a guy. Girls, not right now. That may change in the future. Who knows? But anyways, so far it's just guys. And eventually we're going to get 23% of the total population drafted. That is a hell of a lot of people. So now that we've got a big amount of people drafted, and women are going to volunteer their time as well, as nurses, clerical workers, telephone operators, and such. So, we got a lot of people involved in the war effort. Now we need to shift industry from making consumer goods to wartime goods. So this is where the War Industries Board comes in, because our allies need our products, and so do we. So we need to start making weapons. We need to start producing a lot of food. We need to supply the allies and ourselves. So the War Industries Board is created to increase industrial production and coordinate different industries. So the government is essentially going to take over all the big factories, all the factories, and run them as they see fit. So this board is going to tell the factories what exactly to produce, how much to produce, and how much to sell things for. So, for example, a blouse factory for women is going to start making signal flags for the ships. Radiator manufacturers are going to make guns. Automobile factories make airplanes and airplane engines. A piano company is going to make airplane wings. Industries are definitely going to shift gears as far as what they're producing during the war. So that's why we're able to mass produce all these things for the war effort. Look at that. Helmet manufacturing, airplane manufacturing, wool socks for soldiers. We got a lot going on here. So another part of society that we need to shift to wartime production is going to be food. So Here's what we're going to do. We're going to have to start rationing our food. Because remember, we're feeding the Allies and we are feeding ourselves. So we need to limit the amount of food or resources that people can use up. So we're going to encourage households to definitely eat less meat and like bread products and whatnot, so we could save that for the troops. There's going to be a lot of propaganda posters to try to get people involved in the war effort. You know, slogans like, "Food will win the war, don't waste it." Appealing to our patriotic senses. And, I mean, we are definitely gonna get involved. You could see in that first propaganda poster up there, I mean, they're appealing to the immigrant masses. You see, with appealing to like the scene at Ellis Island, saying that you came here seeking freedom, now you got to help preserve it, do what you can, basically, right? Waste nothing. So we are definitely going to appeal to different areas of society. I mean, the propaganda posters are especially useful during World War I, and we're going to see their return during World War II, where they're probably arguably even more useful because, I mean, yeah. So you could see how they're like, oh, sow the seeds of victory, plant and raise your own vegetables. Food is ammunition, don't waste it. Don't waste food while others starve. Appealing to like our sympathetic side. So even you see like the little propaganda poster appealing to kids. It's like, hey, kid, don't buy that. Don't buy those cookies and like ice cream and stuff. So, I mean, you could see where the other propaganda poster is like, yeah, save wheat, use more corn, use more fish and beans instead of meat. Fats, use just enough to like fry your stuff. Sugar, use syrups instead. Like, you know, just to like shift our mindset and shift how we use these products, especially fuel as well. Fuel also needs to be conserved for the war effort. So the Fuel Administration is in charge of this. And we need to conserve stuff like coal, right, to power our ships and whatnot. So, just like the Food Administration, Americans are going to be asked to conserve their fuel. So the creation of daylight savings time is created during World War I to do just that. So that we utilize more of the daylight by turning our clocks forward and backwards, right? Spring forward, fall back. So, this is the point in time where we're cutting back on like gas, coal, electricity, just all of this. And we even have to deal with labor because the last thing we want is to have like a labor strike at this time. So the National War Labor Board is going to help to settle court disputes, labor disputes, any of that stuff, so they could prevent strikes because we do not want that production to stop. So the National War Labor Board is going to hear like all these different cases, and they're going to work to improve the working conditions. They establish the 8-hour workday in some areas. Standards for employment of women and children were established, and even union membership is going to increase. Wages are going to rise. So yeah, we need to keep workers happy, and this is how we do it. We also have the War Trade Board, which is going to control imports and exports during the war. So we're going to issue licenses to shipping companies, limit the number of imports from neutral countries. So we try to keep our eye on trade. How we're going to pay for all this stuff? Well, we just had the 16th Amendment ratified to the Constitution. So this was supposed to pay for progressive era reforms, and it did for a while, but now we're going to shift gears and have it start paying for war effort as well. So remember, 16th Amendment, graduated income tax. This is a populist reform that the progressives adopted and actually got passed. Another way we're going to pay for this war is through government bonds, war savings stamps, and usage of corporate taxes and excise taxes on luxury goods. the war effort, as far as like raising money for bonds and stuff, everybody's going to get involved. You're going to have drives, you're going to have like parades, you're going to have like so many people involved in the fundraising effort for the war. You know, organizations like the Salvation Army, YMCA, Red Cross, I mean, they're going to get involved as well. Liberty loan drives are going to happen. And of course, propaganda posters to help us pitch in what we can for the war effort. And I love this poster down here where it says, help them. Keep your war savings pledge. You see the war savings stamps that you can buy? How they eventually turn into the bullets from the machine guns? I mean, come on. This is definitely artistic and appealing to our patriotic senses. So, yeah, getting people to pitch into the war effort financially and, of course, by rationing and doing what they can for the war effort, this really helps us to succeed. So like we said, we're going to have parades for Liberty loan drives. Celebrities are going to get involved as well, trying to get people to buy up these war saving stamps and bonds. So, it even targets kids. I mean, yeah, we target kids to like buy some war saving stamps because those are the lower cost options. Bonds are more expensive and loans are more expensive, but yeah, everybody's going to get involved. And I mean, these propaganda posters are essential to the war effort. This committee for public information that's ran by George Creel is going to be in charge of these propaganda posters production. So we use this to beef up the war effort, get people involved. There's going to be not only just propaganda posters, but films, pamphlets, volunteer speakers, basically urging every American to watch out for German spies, do their part for the war. We enlist the services of artists, writers, vaudeville performers, movie stars, you name it, to just increase this patriotic effort and get people involved. I mean, look at this poster right here on the left-hand side. Gee, I wish I were a man. I'd join the Navy. Uncle Sam is going to be used for the first time during this war. The very famous I Want You for the U.S. Army poster is one of the most popular propaganda posters, and it came out of World War I. But I mean, look at the artistic appeal of these things. Yeah, we are definitely appealing to patriotic senses, to senses of duty, and to morality as well. But there is going to be a lot of unrest at this time as well. There's going to be some anti-German sentiment during World War I. So we're going to see a lot of people, a lot of war hysteria surrounding Germans and German Americans, and a lot of prejudices concerning them. The American Protective League is going to use vigilante actions towards all things German. Schools are going to stop offering German languages. Sauerkraut is going to turn into Liberty cabbage. Did we do the same thing against France, like with the War on Terror? They didn't support us with it, so instead of calling things French fries, we called them freedom fries. Yeah, that's a thing. It happened. Look it up. Saloon keepers aren't going to use pretzels in bars. Orchestras aren't going to do stuff from German composers and not going to play their music. And German Americans themselves are going to be badgered, beaten, and sometimes killed. So, I mean, yeah, things get out of hand sometimes. Probably one of the most controversial things that happens during the war, though, is how civil liberties are restricted. So a lot of socialists and pacifists are going to take this risk at criticizing the government's war policy. And so civil liberties are definitely at risk during World War I. And what we mean by civil liberties are basically like your freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and whatnot. Stuff that's guaranteed in the Bill of Rights. But during times of crisis, the government has been known to restrict these rights. World War I was one of those times. Laws are going to be passed that are going to restrict people's civil liberties and threaten those that speak out against the war effort. So 6,000 arrests are made. Over 1,900 prosecutions were made under these laws. And even Eugene Debs, there's our boy Eugene Debs, the socialist leader, right? He's going to be sentenced to 10 years in a federal prison for speaking out against the war. And how these people are prosecuted is through the Espionage Act, which is later going to be referred to as the Sedition Act of 1918. So this is what happens. This key part right here. If you willfully cause or attempt to cause insubordination, disloyalty, mutiny, refusal of duty in the military or naval forces of the U.S., or shall willfully obstruct the recruiting or enlistment service of the United States, you're going to be punished and fined or imprisoned. Or both. So these are some of the people that were thrown in jail because of this. A. Philip Randolph, who is a union leader for African Americans. Eugene Debs. I mean, those are the two big notable names that I recognize right off the top of my head. Let's see. Eastman is a journalist. Reed is a journalist. Berger is against the war. Haywood was arrested for opposing the war with his union, the IWW. So remember the International Workers of the World. So I mean, yeah. And then we've got Charles Shank, which Shank versus the U.S. We'll talk about it right now. But anyways, here's part of the Sedition Act in 1918. Here's more of it. This part right here. Willfully utter, print, write, or publish any disloyal, profane, scurrilous, or abusive language about the form of government of the United States or the Constitution or the military or naval forces of the United States. So even if you print something, so there goes your freedom of the press, right, and freedom of speech. You also are going to be subject to those same fines, imprisonment, or both. In the case of Emma Goldman, she's deported. I mean, she's deported to Russia because she speaks out against the war, along with Alexander Berkman. They're both deported. So, what's also going to happen is that the presidential proclamation that happens in April 19th, 1918 is going to redefine persons listed as alien enemies, which is going to include both men and women, whether they be naturalized citizens or not. They're born in Germany, Austria, or Turkish Empire, and women who are married to these people. So here's an example. If you're married to like whoever they deem as an alien enemy, you're kind of in trouble too. So this is very problematic. But probably the most problematic thing is the court ruling of Schenck versus the United States. So Charles Schenck is the General Secretary of the American Socialist Party. Now, he's going to oppose the war. He mails off pamphlets to recent draftees saying that, yeah, the draft is a violation of the 13th Amendment because essentially you're forced into this, like, slavery, right? Or at least that's the argument that he made. So they should petition for the repeal of the draft. He's going to be arrested and convicted for interfering with military recruitment under that Espionage Act. But he's going to argue, you know what? Hey, this is my freedom of speech. The Supreme Court's going to be like, yeah, you have the freedom of speech. However, the Espionage Act is illegal because what you were doing, This is what the Supreme Court's telling Shank. What you were doing was creating what's known as clear and present danger. So this would be kind of like yelling fire in a crowded theater. Yes, you do have the freedom of speech to yell out fire, but it's going to cause harm to the people. It creates this clear and present danger. And so, because these words could cause harm and have a negative impact on people in society, therefore your freedom of speech is null and void. So, we're going to use this several times, but yeah, so you don't really have free speech during wartime because of Schenck versus the United States. So, that is a very important court case to remember, guys, for sure. Free speech is definitely restricted during wartime. So, speaking of wartime, we do have what's known as total war, where everybody has a role and they get involved for the war effort. And who has a huge role? Women. Women are going to take over the jobs left behind by the men. And this is where they start to get respect. And this is where Wilson and other politicians start to take suffrage seriously, because they see how women are contributing to this war effort. They're stepping up to the plate and they are delivering with this. So, because of their massive war effort, Wilson's finally going to agree, and Congress is going to support the 19th Amendment post World War I. But I mean, women are not only working in the factories, but they're also working as nurses, contributing to the war effort as well. As minorities are definitely contributing to the war effort, because, I mean, you could see how they are gathering, to work not only in agriculture and mining, like these people from Mexico coming in, but you can also see in the picture on the bottom right there, we have Native Americans that are going to be working as shipbuilders in Pennsylvania and other areas, and African Americans especially are going to be important to the war effort. There's going to be this great migration where you have a massive amount of African Americans moving from the South up north to work in these factory jobs left behind by the men at the war. So with this great migration, we're going to start to see cultural diffusion happen. And in the 20s, we're going to start to see jazz become popular, blues. And this all culminates in places like Harlem for the Harlem Renaissance. So when we talk about the 20s, we'll get back to this great migration to show how much of an impact it really did have on the culture of northern cities. But of course, there's going to be like racial clashes because of this as well, and, riots and such. But this great migration is important. African Americans are also going to serve in the military, albeit in segregated units. And it's kind of quite sad because, they're not allowed to fight along with the white troops. They're cast aside and given to the French. The French are like, yes, we appreciate you. And so some of these men pictured here, like Henry Johnson and Needham Roberts, are going to receive the French Croix de Guerre, which is essentially the War Cross. It's like their Medal of Honor. So African Americans see how they're treated by the French versus how they're treated by the Americans, and they start to kind of think about their rights. They think about how differently Europeans are treating them, and they're treating them more with respect. So, people like W.E.B. Du Bois are going to say that, them fighting to make the world safe for democracy should earn them equal rights at home when the war ended. But a lot of African Americans are still going to be faced with prejudice and racism when they return home. Some stay in Europe. screw this, man. Europeans treat us way better, so some are going to stay. But, yeah, they're going to start to get this sense of empowerment because of how involved they are with the war, and the Black community is going to become extremely empowered during the Harlem Renaissance in the 20s, and some of it is due to the wartime experiences that they had. So shifting gears a little bit, guys. Prohibition actually gets passed around this time too. And Prohibition is the 18th Amendment. It's passed by Congress, ratified by the states in 1919, and takes place in 1920. So just remember, Prohibition is getting rid of alcohol, the sale and consumption. Sale and consumption. So, as far as fighting over there, guys, APUSH really doesn't ask you guys much about the actual war, but we'll get into it a little bit right here. So, the guy in charge is General John J. Blackjack Pershing. Remember, the same guy that was hunting down Pancho Villa. He's recalled, and now he's the commander of the American Expeditionary Force in World War I. And I love this quote from him. "All a soldier needs to know is how to shoot and salute." Bruh, that is such a military quote. So, by the time we finally do get over there, I mean, it's going to be late 1917. Millions of European soldiers on both sides have already been killed. The Russians have already, withdrawn from the war. And no Eastern Front to divide the forces. Germany can now concentrate on the Allies and France. So it's not looking very good when the American Expeditionary Force comes in, but they're going to prove to be vital to the war effort. They're going to reinforce the British and French lines, and by the time all is said and done, by spring of 1918, they stop the German advancement, and in August, September, and October, the Allies are going to be successful in the Argonne Forest. So we officially drive back the German army towards Germany, and one of our boys is going to be a big-time war hero in the Battle of the Argonne Forest, which is Sergeant Alvin York here. So he wins the Congressional Medal of Honor, and along with flying ace Eddie Rickenbacker, he's also going to win the Congressional Medal of Honor, and William Billy Mitchell is given the Distinguished Service Cross and Distinguished Service Medal for his service in World War I. He is often thought of as the father of the U.S. Air Force. So, when it comes to the unrestricted submarine warfare, how we combat that is through the convoy system. We're going to have armed escorts for merchant ships. So, basically, a merchant ship is going to be escorted by a battleship of some sort. So, I mean, this is what we see, and the convoy system is successful in combating against the German U-boats, for sure. It works well enough, and ensures that Great Britain and France are not starving by the end of 1917. But really, the human cost of the war, I mean, our combat deaths are going to total nearly 49,000, but what kills us even more is the flu outbreak in 1918. It's often referred to as the Spanish flu. It resembles more like swine flu, like H1N1, but this pandemic lasted 4 years. So I know you guys have heard a lot about it because of, the current pandemic, but this spread like crazy here in the United States. It was traced back to, I think, an Army fort in Kansas. Soldiers are going to be suddenly dying. We identify it as a strain of influenza, but unlike anything we've ever seen, this is going to spread like crazy across the country. Hospitals are going to overfill, death carts roam the streets. I mean, mass graves are going to be dug. This is the worst epidemic we'd ever seen. It kills over 600,000 people, which is 5 times the amount of soldier deaths because of the war. And it kind of disappears as mysteriously as it came around. So you guys could look up more stuff about the influenza outbreak in 1918. I'm sure you could find a lot of videos that compare it to our current outbreak. And I may show one in class, so remind me, guys. Stay tuned. All right, let's end this war. So, the Bolshevik Revolution happened in 1917, and Tsar Nicholas II is forced to abdicate. Forced 11 million peasants to fight in this war, even though there was high rates of injury and death. And the people are getting very discontented over all of this. So there's going to be mass demonstrations, and the Russian Revolution is officially going to take hold. Tsar Nicholas, yes, is forced to abdicate his throne, but he will be killed eventually. And Lenin, who's in charge of the Bolshevik Party, is going to take control. So, he's going to remove the Russians from the war in March of 1918. I think after he's disposed of, Trotsky, right? Somebody clear me up on my world history. I'm kind of shaky on that. But there's a secret treaty that goes on between the French and the British with the agreement with the Russians. They agree to divide up the Ottoman Empire in the Middle East after the war. This is published by Lenin to prove that the war was just a rich man's thing. Of course, this angers people like Wilson, who's pushing for his moral diplomacy to do the right thing, so he gets kind of mad at the Allies. But Wilson has a different plan in mind. Wilson wants to do his 14 points, essentially. He wants to have peace without victory, and wants to essentially do these very things. So let's go into these points. The last point being the most important one, which is the creation of an international peace association, the League of Nations. So here are the points. End all secret alliances, essentially secret diplomacy, freedom of the seas, and peace in the war, removal of trade barriers among nations, general reduction of arms, adjustment of colonial claims in the interest of the inhabitants as well as the colonial power, and, of course, the most important one, the League of Nations, point number 14. So, the armistice is officially signed on the 11th hour, the 11th month, 11th day. So November 11, 1918, World War I officially ends. The United States celebrates in big parades that actually helps to spread the Spanish influenza, which is really bad, especially places like Boston and Philadelphia. Yeah, bad parade, bad outbreak. But you could see the death toll around the world. I mean, this is going to cost so much money and so much in lives lost. This truly is a devastating war, especially for Europe. Now we need to settle some peace here. The Big Four are going to meet at the Paris Peace Conference. We've got Great Britain wanting to maintain trade and relations with Germany, but also wants its colonies. Italy wants the land that it was promised during World War I. France wants to punish the hell out of Germany because, after all, the Western Front was in France. France got tore up because of this war. And they want to prevent future invasion by Germany. And Wilson over here, looking like the idealist, wants the League of Nations and his 14 points. So the Treaty of Versailles is only going to adopt the League of Nations. It's not going to adopt any of the other 14 points. There are territorial adjustments. There are armed restrictions and reparations and war guilt against Germany. You could see how the territories shift right here, right? And Germany's military is drastically going to be cut down. And the war guilt clause makes certain that Germany admits it started the war and is going to pay for reparations. So, because of all the damage that it caused. So all of this is included in the Treaty of Versailles, which is signed on June 28th, 1919. And the Senate doesn't want to approve the treaty because of the League of Nations. They fear that it's going to take away from their sovereign power and cause European nations to interfere, will cause us to interfere, and European nations to kind of get involved in our business in the Western Hemisphere, violating Monroe Doctrine. So Henry Cabot Lodge is the biggest opponent to this treaty. So Wilson's going to go around the country campaigning, trying to get people to sign on for the treaty. He suffers a stroke and doesn't really recover from it. And damn, I'm out of time. Okay, so a lot of people are going to feel that Wilson is being an idealist with this. Some people think the League of Nations is necessary. Others believe it will not work. The Senate, in the end, refuses to ratify the Treaty of Versailles, does a separate treaty instead with Germany, and we aren't involved in the club that we started, the League of Nations. So, essentially, this is what happens. Yes, we do become a superpower. Our economy did grow during the war, but we're going to hit a recession shortly after. We have an anti-war movement because of this war, because we're so traumatized by what happened in World War I. We don't want another one like it, so we're going to be very isolationist following World War I. We are going to have our culture spread abroad. Black empowerment is going to come out of this. Women are going to work outside the home even more. And we've got this anti-communism Red Scare coming around in the 20s. But some of our post-war problems, demobilization. What do we do with the troops after the war? Business boom is going to end. They can't find jobs. Crop prices are going to fall and factory production falls. And then the Red Scare. I mean, this is an anti-communist hysteria going around. Fears of socialism. And even with the Palmer raids, I mean, Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer is going to establish what's going to become the FBI, and he orders these people to arrest anarchist, socialist, labor agitators and deport them. Then we got labor strikes. I mean, this is going to happen as well. And we also have race riots. So we got the migration of African Americans to northern cities, again, because of the Great Migration. So this is going to definitely affect racial tensions out north. So, all right, guys, I am officially out of time. I will talk to you guys later. We will continue with all of these post-war problems when we talk about the 20s. Bye, guys.